Good morning world, good morning Philippines. This is Angeline Orquiza reporting. The news update for today is all about the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. It was an uprising of Filipino military personnel of Fort San Felipe, the Spanish arsenal in Cavite, Philippine Island in January 20, 1872. Around 200 locally recruited colonial troops and laborers rose up in the belief that it would elevate to a national uprising. The primary cause of the mutiny is believed to be an order from the Governor-General, Rafael de Izquierdo, to subject the soldiers to the engineering and artillery corps to personal taxes from which they were previously exempt. The non-Spanish foreign journalists during the 1872 Cavite Mutiny event were active in seeking reforms. They are members in the propaganda movement and are called propagandists or reformists that work outside and inside the Philippines. They seek the recognition of the Philippines as a province of Spain, equal status for both Filipinos and Spaniards, Philippine representation in the Spanish Cortes, secularization of the Philippine parishes, and recognition of human rights. They never asked for Philippine independence because its members believed that once Spain realized the pitiful state of the country, the Spaniards would implement the changes the Filipinos were seeking. For more information, here is Ms. Meg Iragel. Ms. Meg?
During the execution of GOMBURZA in 1872, Indios wrote propaganda materials that exposed the abuses of the friars. The significance of the three priests' execution stemmed from the fact that those who witnessed it began to think and feel like Filipinos rather than Ilocanos, Tagalogs, Visayans, Bicolanos, and etc. During the execution, Indians felt the fears and danger under the supervision of Spaniards. However, despite the feelings of fears, the risk they will face, and the stain of dramatic events further rotting the three Filipino Catholic priests, Filipino Indians fight Spaniards to stop the cruelty and killings of other Filipino citizens. As for the events happened in 1872 Cavite Mutiny, the Spaniards made Indians to become their slaves. Indians were deprived from the rights of a Filipino citizen. Spaniards removed the rights of recognition, dignity, and respect. They suffered from the abuse of Spaniards in forcing them to work without their presence of willingness, to receive less or little salary, removal of individuals' benefits and rights for their freedom. Indians experienced prejudice, injustice, unfair treatment, abuse, and imprisonment during the events of GOMBURZA and Cavite Mutiny in 1872. This is Miguel Iradel reporting. Back to you, Angeline.
Thank you, Ms. Meg. And now let's hear from Aisha Belbayatan as a Filipino secular priest during the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. Ms. Aisha?
Thank you, Ms. Angeline. Cue the perfect opportunity. In 1872, dock workers in the Cavite Arsenal clamored for better pay and attempted a humanity, but was crushed overnight. The facts of the case was unclear, but during the trial, three names were singled out: the secular priest Jose Burgos, Mariano Gomez, and Jacinto Zamora. GOMBURZA refers to the three Filipino priests who were executed by Garrote in 17 February 1872 in Bagumbayan, Philippines by Spanish colonial authorities on charges of subversion arising from 1872 Cavite Mutiny. GOMBURZA inquired the hatred of Spanish authorities for fighting for equal rights among the priests and leading the campaign against the Spanish friars. They fought on the issues of the secularization in the Philippines that led to the conflict of religious and church seculars. Their execution had a profound effect on many late 19th century in Filipinos. Jose Rizal, later to become the country's national hero, who dedicated his novel El Filibusterismo to their memory. Immunity by workers in the Cavite Naval Yard was the pretext needed by the authorities to redress a perceived humanization for the principal objective Jose Burgos, who threatened the established order.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha. And now let's hear from Mr. Robert De Lopio. Mr. Robert?
Thank you, Ms. Angeline. On February 17, 1872, Fathers Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos and Jacinto Zamora, or GOMBURZA, all Filipino priests, was executed by the Spanish colonizers on charges of subversion. The charges against Fathers Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora was their aligned complicity in the uprising of workers at the Cavite Naval Yard. Their deaths were by no means small events at the time. The Ilustrado class was furious and demanded an explanation and reforms. 20 years later, during the 1890s, a new crop of Ilustrados would take inspiration from the death of GOMBURZA. One of them, a man named Jose Rizal, would write his novel, Nola Me Tangere, and dedicated it to the trio. The death of GOMBURZA solidified the nascent nationalism felt by so many. The concept of Filipino and what is Philippine only grew from there. Besides Rizal, the Katipunan also grew emboldened with the liberal ideas which propelled their inadvertent martyrdom, even going so far as using GOMBURZA as a password. Ultimately, the secularization movement would grow into a call for a Holy Filipino Church. During the Revolution of 1896, two men, Isabelo de los Reyes and Father Gregorio Aglipan, would make that dream a reality and create a church that was truly Filipino, the Iglesia Filipina Independiente. The death of GOMBURZA awakened strong feelings of anger and resentment among the Filipinos. They questioned Spanish authorities and demanded reforms. The martyrdom of the three priests apparently helped to inspire the organization of the propaganda movement, which aimed to seek reforms and inform Spain of the abuses of its colonial government. This is Robert A. Lopio reporting. Back to you, Angeline.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. And now let's hear from Miss Giselle Mahinay as a Spanish administrator. Miss Giselle?
Thank you, Miss Angeline. The Spanish administrator played a huge role during the events in 1872. The supreme head of the Spanish administration of the Philippines was the Governor-General. The Commission of Legazpi authorized him to exercise judicial functions to hear, examine, and decide in a civil or criminal suit, and to administer over civil and criminal justice in company with an officer of justice who may be appointed. The Governor-General was invested with despotic powers. One of the Spanish administrators during 1872 is Rafael Jeronimo Cayetano Izquierdo y Gutierrez. He served as Governor-General of the Philippines from April 4, 1871 to January 1873. He was famous for his use of iron fist type of government, contradicting the liberal government of his predecessor Carlos Maria de la Torre y Navacerrada. He was the Governor-General during the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, which led to execution of 41 of the mutineers, including the GOMBURZA martyrs. He insisted that the mutiny is stimulated and prepared by the native clergy, mestizos, and lawyers as a signal of objection against the injustice of government, such as not paying provinces for tobacco crops, pay tribute, and rendering of forced labor. It was believed by the Governor Rafael Izquierdo that the Filipinos will create its own government, and allegedly, the three priests, also called GOMBURZA, were nominated as the leader of the planned government in order to break free of the Spanish government. He was also known to have promptly rescinded the liberal measures, thus implementing harsher laws, which ignited an uprising. The Reformation suggested that the soldiers of engineering and artillery corps should pay taxes, from which they were previously exempt. Another drastic change was the requirement to perform manual labor. These changes eventually led to 1872 Cavite Mutiny, in which around 200 soldiers of the engineering and artillery corps revolted and killed their officers. This is Jusil Ann Mahinay reporting. Back to you, Angeline.
Thank you, Miss Giselle. The road to independence was rough and tough to tattle. Many patriots, named and unnamed, shed their bloods to attain reforms and achieve independence. This 1872 Cavite Mutiny was the proof that our forefathers suffered enough during the ruling of Spaniards. As we enjoy our freedom, may we be more historically aware of our past to have a better future ahead of us. And just like what Jose Rizal said in Noli Me Tangere, may we not forget those who fell during the night. And that's the latest update for today. And you are watching Central News.